Hello, welcome to Papa Nick's Music. I am, as always, your host, Papa Nick Lewis, and today we are continuing our Top 10 Favorites series. I've already given you my top 10 favorite drummers, my top 10 favorite bassists. Today we are talking about my top 10 favorite one-album wonders. Now let me first tell you what I mean when I say one-album wonder. It is not, as you might assume, a recording artist who recorded and released one album and then just stopped, quit, went off, did something else. No. This is my mental tag for any artist where that artist has released one album that I really, really like. I like it. I love it. And I love it so much that I just naturally assumed I would like the rest of the catalog. And the more I've listened to other releases that the artist has had, the more I realize that, no, I don't love the catalog. I love that one album, right? In order to qualify here, we've got our normal criteria. To be included in one of my top 10 favorites, I've got two criteria. I have to be in some way attached to, inspired by the work. And secondly, I have to own a copy of that work, that artist's work, whatever. This time I'm adding a third criterion. I'm only dealing with artists who have released at least 5 albums. 5 is my minimum. It's not really a one album wonder if they've only released like 2 or 3 albums. No. But if somebody has released, let's say 23 albums and I only like one of them, that's a one album wonder. Okay? So that's what we're doing today. We're talking about one album wonders. Before we get into this, subjectivity notice. We firmly believe here at Papa Nick's Music, one of our guiding principles here at Papa Nick's Music is that there is no such thing as objectively good or objectively bad art. There is only art that I like and art that I do not. And as long as we keep that in mind, this is a wonderful conversation. It's entertaining, it's enlightening, it's sitting around, having a beer with friends, perhaps a Schofferhofer. That's good beer. But we're sitting around, we're shooting the shit, and we're just, it's just for laughs. It's just, it's entertainment. It's also, I would argue, informative because it is our opportunity to see the world from somebody else's perspective, which is always a good thing. The conversation is always fun up until the point when somebody insists on being seen as being objectively right. That's when everything goes down the shit chute. So let's not do that. I'm not saying that that you will experience these albums exactly the same way that I do. No. These are my top 10 favorite one album wonders. If you've got a one album wonder of your own, drop that in the comments. Let's get this conversation. Share. Let's get this conversation going. Also, this is a top 10 favorite series, so it is unofficially sponsored by Schofferhofer Beer. If you like grapefruit soda and Hefeweizen beer, ooh, you're going to love Schofferhofer. That's good beer. Really is good beer. Okay, now, before I get into the ranking, let's talk about how I'm ranking these. I've got them arranged, in the normal fashion. We've got a top 10, so I'm starting with 10 and I'm working my way up to number 1. The ranking, though, is not done by how much I love the album or what I think the qualities of the album are or anything like that. You should make draw no conclusions about relative quality of these albums based on how they stack up here. It's not what I'm going for. I am ranking these by 2 factors. My first factor is surprise. How surprising is it that I've got this album on the list? How surprising is it to me? How surprising was it to me when I realized that this album was going to be a one-album wonder? How surprising do I think the average person who only knows what they know about me from their interaction with these videos, and I've made several elements of my taste clear. So how surprising is it, I think, to an interested bystander that this would be a one-album wonder? I'm also ranking them by confidence. There are a couple of places where I had really a tie, and I had a hard time choosing between the two by the surprise factor. So my second qualifier was confidence. How confident am I that, yes, this is in fact a one-album wonder? There are a couple of these that could very well be pulled off the list simply because I haven't gone out of my way to listen to the rest of the catalog. I've listened to enough to think that this album might be an outlier, but I have not proven that to myself on a couple of these. So that's also a factor in the ranking. Cool? Okay. Which means my number 10, one album wonder, should not be that much of a surprise. And I don't think it's that much of a surprise. I think if we just get a random sample of people my general age and ask, give them the definition of one album wonder and ask them to pick one, I think a fairly popular choice is going to be Meatloaf's Bad Out of Hell. Meatloaf has released 6 albums. 6 albums, seriously. I own 2 of them. I've got this, and then I've got an old copy of Dead Ringer around here somewhere. And I adore this album. And I really don't have any need to to listen to the rest of them. This is lightning in a bottle as far as I'm concerned. So, number 10, Meatloaf, Bad Out of Hell. One album wonder. Okay. Number 2. I don't think this one is going to be a lot of a surprise simply because I don't know how many of you actually are familiar with this guy. My next artist has released 26 albums, has been cranking these things out for a long time. I own 3 of them, but I really only love one of them, and that is Laugh by Keller Williams. I adore this album. There we go. That's a pretty good shot of it. I adore this album, and I would love to see Keller Williams in concert. I've never had a chance to do that. I've never gotten an alert that he's coming to my neighborhood or anything like that. But I would love to see him play in concert. I think the world of him as a musician. He's, I think, a very good songwriter. But for whatever reason, this is the only album of his that really strongly connected to me. It was the first album of his that I had heard. And I was attracted to it because on the contemporary adult alternative, whatever that, milk toast station was on the streaming provider I was using at the time, was very fond of his song Freaker by the Speaker. And what was the other one? Might have been Kidney in a Cooler. I think it might have been One Hit Wonder. Anyway, there are a couple of songs off of this that were in regular rotation back in the 2006, 2007 neighborhood when I was listening to that provider. And I liked them well enough that I bought the album. And I love the album. It is one of my favorite albums. I love this album. And I've gotten a couple of other albums of his, and they're not bad. They're the occasional good song. I'm not saying the rest of his catalog is shit. It's just none of it catches my attention the way this one does. So, number 9, Laugh by Keller Williams. Strongly recommend this album, by the way. Number 8. Kind of in the same vein here. I think this one is surprising, or is not surprising, simply because I don't know that a whole lot of my viewers are going to be familiar with this guy. He's got 14 albums that he's released. The guy's name is Josh Rouse. And I really love El Turista. My God, do I love this album. This is one of my all-time favorite albums. If I'm creating my list of my all-time, if the house is on fire, I got to save these albums, this is very likely going to crack the top 10. I adore this album. Love this album. And I've got 2 other albums of his over there in my CD rack. And they're not bad, they just don't connect to me the way El Turista did. I very strongly recommend El Turista. This is a wonderful, wonderful album. And yeah, it's, as far as the rest of his albums go, I strongly recommend El Turista. Okay, coming in at number 7, we've got, it's a little bit more surprising, but I think not so much because I'm including him on the list, but rather because I'm including him, period. This is a channel where I mostly talk about classic rock. I don't talk about country, so it seems surprising that we'd have Mac Davis cropping up on the list here. But I really love Texas in My Rearview Mirror. I think this is a fantastic album. It is on my, I've had an album or a video series last summer where I talked about perfect albums. I'm pretty sure all three of these albums that I've listed so far were listed in that, and I listed this one as well. There are a couple of songs that I'll be honest I have to be in the mood for. Rodeo Clown, In the Eyes of My People, just they're not bad songs. It's just I got to be in the mood for it. But the rest of it is just wonderful, wonderful, slightly country flavored pop music. And I loved it so much. I already knew who Mac Davis was when I had heard that. I bought this album because I'd heard the single "Hooked on Music" released on the radio, and so I really liked that song. Bought a copy of the album. I knew who Mac Davis was because he used to have a variety show on TV in the late '70s that I remember watching as a kid, and I really liked the album. I liked it well enough that I started looking for Mac Davis records whenever I was going through used books and stuff like that. I have 3 other Mac Davis albums, and none of them even come close to this thing. Oh, wonderful album, and probably the only one of his that I'll ever need. I wish that it would be released on CD because I'm living in fear that the quality of my vinyl is just going to go steadily downhill the more I play this thing, because I do play it fairly frequently, and it's out of print, so pretty much stuck with what I can find in a used record store. Okay, that was number 7, Texas in My Rearview Mirror. Number 6. Okay, now we're getting into the really surprising stuff. If you've watched my videos where I've talked about albums that had an impression on me, if you watched, for example, my Steely Dan ranking video, I've made it clear that one of the single most impactful albums I have ever heard in my life is Tower of Power's self-titled release from 75, 74? I can't read it without my glasses on. 74. Their self-titled Tower of Power. Oh man, I love this album. I love this album. And I have listened to a few other Tower of Power albums. I've streamed them. This is the only one that I actually own a physical copy of, because I've streamed other albums and I'm not saying they're bad. I don't dislike them, but they don't connect to me the way this one did. Even when I'm watching concert footage, I'll hear them do other songs, and it's like, okay, that's good. That's perfectly acceptable music. I certainly understand why people like it. And then they'll segue into what is hip, and I'm just like, oh man, this is sign me up, right? This is a brilliant album. I love this album, and it's the only one of theirs that I've heard that I like well enough that I've gotten a copy of it. So, Tower of Power, a surprising entry on my top 10 favorite one-album wonders. Coming in at number 5. Okay, from here on out, we've got ones that are surprising, but I'm also very confident, right? This one placed out of the top 5 because there are still several other Tower of Power albums I could listen to. So it's entirely possible that one of them will grab me the way this one has. I don't think it's likely, but it's possible. But from here on out, I've listened to enough of the catalog. I'm confident these are all, my top 5 are all one-album wonders. Coming in at number 5, they've released 8 albums. I own 3 of them. And the only one that's worth owning is Lost and Gone Forever by Guster. The other albums are okay. There's occasional good bits, but Guster is a perfect album. Lost and Gone Forever is a perfect album. I adore this album. I say that a lot, but I do adore this album. Every song on it is fantastic. What You Wish For is great. Barrel of a Gun. Oh man, I love Barrel of a Gun. All the Way Up to Heaven. Oh man, I love All the Way Up to Heaven. Center of Attention. I really like Center of Attention. There's a lot of really good music on this. There are bits of good performance on the other albums, but none of the songwriting on the other albums compares to the songwriting here from my perspective. This stuff talks to me on a molecular level the way the other albums don't. So, number 5, Lost and Gone Forever by Guster. Number 4. This is Yep, all of my remaining four are good old fashioned. They are good old fashioned. This is the album that introduced me to the artist. This was an album that I loved so much that I just assumed I would like everything by the artist, and that has not proven to be the case. Right? I've got very high confidence that these are all one album wonders, and I adore all four of these albums. Three of them are perfect. One of them is not. Reasons we'll get to when we get to it. But I am 100% confident that these are one album wonders. Coming in at number 4, the debut album of Heart, Dreamboat Annie, is superlative. This is a perfect album. This is fantastic. Oh man, do I love this album. I've got 3 other Heart albums in there. Not counting greatest hits. I mean, if we count a greatest hits album, okay, there's going to be a second one, because there are I like most of their radio tracks, but as far as album start to finish album goes, this is the one. I love this album, and I'm okay to miss out on the rest of the catalog, except for the greatest hits. Okay, number 3. I've never been a particularly big fan of James Taylor. I don't dislike him. There are several of his songs that I think are wonderful, but as much as I've tried, nothing has matched the thrill I had when I first heard JT. I got a copy of this thing on the strength of the radio hit Your Smiling Face, which I thought was a wonderful song when this came out in, 77, 78, whatever that time was. And listened to the album. Man, start to finish, love this thing. It's fantastic. I've memorized all the songs. It's just wonderful. Love this album. And I go and I've listened to I've got 4 other albums by James Taylor. And don't really love any of them. This is another case where even a greatest hits, I'm not going to, I'll like maybe 3/4 of the songs off of the greatest hits. Right? I'm just not a huge fan of James Taylor, but boy howdy did he knock this one out of the park. I love JT. Love everything about it. I'm particularly fond of The Secret of Life, which I think that's going to be in my top 10 of all-time favorite songs. Nicely done. Nicely done, Mr. Taylor. Okay. I originally thought of doing this video a couple, 3 weeks ago. I did the drummer video, and then I was going to do the bass video, and then I thought, no, I want to do this one first. And I started getting ready to do it, and I started pulling out my examples, pulling out my vinyl from the stacks back there and the stacks back there, the various places where I got vinyl stacked up. And I couldn't find my vinyl copy of this next album. I find it hard to believe that I would have sold it, because it is an album that I've owned, the actual pressing of that album I've owned since I was a little kid. But evidently, good beer. But evidently I got rid of it somewhere along the way, or I was targeted by a very specific thief, because I no longer had a copy of this album. So I had to put this little production on hold until I could get a copy of Tres Hombres by ZZ Top. Oh man, do I love this album. I love everything about this album, start to finish. It just has a mood, an emotional context that takes me back to being, 4th grade, 5th grade, 3rd grade, however old I was when it came out. I'm not going to look at it. But it takes me back to being a kid and listening to this. And I just, every song is a winner. Every song I know backwards and forwards. And I have tried. I've got 7 other ZZ Top albums in my collection. I have tried to like ZZ Top. I've even got some of Billy Gibbons' solo stuff. I have tried to like ZZ Top. And there are individual bits that I do like. The individual bits from the 80s that I like. Individual bits from the 70s that I like. I like Tush, for example. But this is the only album that speaks to me. This is the only album that I need to have a copy of. So much so that I almost broke down when I realized I didn't have that vinyl copy anymore. Oh, broke my heart. But I got it. But my number one. Okay, up to this point we've had perfect albums. My number one is not a perfect album. It is in fact one of the albums that I used when I started my perfect album series. The first thing I did before I started doing those perfect album videos was I outlined what I thought a perfect album was. And I used examples of albums that fell short because I could think of this album and I would think, okay, yeah, I love that album a lot, but I don't think it's a perfect album. Why not? Well, because it's got this, right? And that's how I developed my criteria for what is a perfect album. And one of those albums that I used is Fragile by Yes. I love this album. This has been one of my favorite albums since I was a kid, right? I used to have the vinyl copy of this that I sold was not the original one that I had when I was young. It was a copy that I bought when I was in college. So I know why I sold that vinyl copy when I got this thing on CD. I love Fragile. It was my first favorite album, and it is still regularly jockeying for my favorite album. I have an affection for it that runs deep, that is almost genetic. It is a part of me the way my left hand is a part of me. It will always be. And it's pretty much the only Yes album that I can listen to. I've tried. According to my spreadsheet over here, Yes has released 23 albums, and I own 13 of them. I have tried to get into this band, and I can listen to it for a little bit, for like maybe a song, maybe 2 songs, and then it's like, yeah, I can't do that anymore. And I have to take it off. One of when I did my favorite bassist video a couple of weeks ago, I wanted to put Chris Squire on the list because, my God, he tears it up. I mean, geez, it's Chris Squire, for crying out loud. And ultimately, I didn't, because I've got one album of Chris Squire that I like. The rest of the albums he does well, but it's not connected to me the way this one does. Right? I love Fragile. And I'm largely ambivalent about the rest of their, at least the 13 albums that I've got access to, that I've listened to. And I'm pretty sure that's going to be the the limit. I don't see me, backfilling with the rest of the of the catalog. So those are my 10 favorite one album wonders. What are yours? Drop that note down below. Let's get a conversation going. I always love to hear from you. I hope you enjoyed the video today. If you did, I would appreciate it if you'd click the like button. While you're down there clicking, go ahead and click the subscribe button as well. You might as well. It's free. And if you do subscribe, then click the bell for notifications. It makes a difference to the YouTube folks, so I would appreciate it. Thanks again for watching today, and I hope, whoa, my die went all crazy. I hope that the rest of your day is invigorating. See you soon.